The Final Summit is produced by Bloodstream Media and made possible thanks to our sponsor, Tremo Pharmaceuticals. Visit resethastudy.com to learn more about their work. The Final Summit was also made possible by support from Genentech. Visit genentechhemophilia.com to take a look at how they are supporting the hemophilia community.
Standing on the summit of Mount Everest was and still is one of the most victorious moments of my life. To witness and absorb the view that I had been dreaming of for so many years was awe-inspiring. Then, when I pulled out of my pocket the Save One Life flag, covered in the signatures of the many people with hemophilia I met in Nepal, I felt them with me, standing right beside me. That flag represented so much. This summit meant so much. But at the same time, it was just one more step in the journey to complete my overall goal, climbing the 7 summits. Step, step, breath. Step, step, breath. There was still one more mountain left. A much easier climb than Everest, Mount Vinson in Antarctica stands at just over 16,000 feet high. It's not a technical climb, but anything having to do with Antarctica amplifies the challenge. There are no hospitals or quick access to care. Even getting off the continent can take days or weeks, depending on the weather. A year and a half earlier, I applied to climb Mount Vinson. I wanted Everest to be last. I wanted this journey to culminate in the most difficult and well-known climb, but that plan wasn't meant to be. Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, known as the ALE, the organization that manages commercial operations on Mount Vinson, denied my permit to climb the mountain because I have severe hemophilia. It was a devastating moment in my life. I had so desperately tried not to be defined by my bleeding disorder, but now I was being rejected specifically for it. I felt like a failure, and this was a feeling I was all too familiar with. I felt judged because I had a bleeding disorder, and I needed to prove to them that I could handle it. Now, I had climbed Mount Everest and had to hope that was enough for ALE to see I had it in me to climb Mount Vinson. But it was out of my hands. Did I do enough to convince them? I never realized how prevalent and deeply seated that feeling is in my psyche. That feeling of not being good enough. I always associated it with physical achievements, always having to push myself harder to show that I wasn't less than anyone else. But since my climbs, those feelings have still crept up in other spaces in my life. If summiting Everest didn't do the trick, how can I prove to myself that I'm good enough? And what does that even mean? From Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, this is the Final Summit Podcast, supported through advertising by Tremo Pharmaceuticals and Genentech. My name is Chris Bombardier, and I'm a mountaineer with hemophilia. From 2011 to 2018, I successfully climbed the 7 summits, the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents. But in between continents, peaks, and infusions, I learned so much more about myself, my disease, and my place in the world. On our final episode, Everest and Vinson, and what it means to achieve your dreams.
Chronic pain can be caused by many things, but if you have severe hemophilia, there's a chance that some of your pain might be the result of what's called hemophilic arthropathy, or HA for short. That's why I'm excited to tell you about the Reset HA study from Tremo Pharmaceuticals. Tremo is founded with the goal of developing and delivering non-opioid pain therapies for people living with pain. Tremo's Reset HA study is a clinical research study for people who experience joint pain due to hemophilia. The study is evaluating an oral non-opioid investigational drug designed to be taken once a day to see if it may potentially help relieve joint pain and improve physical function in people with hemophilic arthropathy, HA. You may be eligible to participate in this clinical research study if you are between the ages of 12 to 75, have been diagnosed with hemophilia A or B, have chronic pain in one or more joints, and do not take opioid medication more than 4 days a week. If you are interested in learning more about taking part in Tremo's Reset HA study, visit resethastudy.com. That's RESETHA study.com to find a location near you. Reset the way you manage your pain. Visit resethastudy.com today.
I think it's 2015, I first applied to go to Antarctica, and they denied my permit. Was that the first occurrence you've ever had of that?
Yes, it was.
This is Ryan Waters again.
It's funny. Looking back, I can't remember. I feel like I was either like really confident it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Or I kind of was wondering if they were going to say, like, I was kind of in the middle of like, they're either going to go one way or the other. It's just going to get glanced over on the little application paper, or this is going to be a giant red flag, and then it could create some issues. So,
yep. And it was the second.
Obviously that year it was a red flag.
It's only been recently that I've been able to kind of understand how really having hemophilia has led to this notion of not being good enough, always feeling a little different, even though I might not have looked different, but in my mind, always knowing that there's this thing that quote unquote is wrong with me. I remember, like elementary school, going to the nurse's office before school started and meeting with the nurse and the teachers. And it was like, we have to tell the teacher about what's wrong with you. And it always just made me feel like there's something I should be ashamed of, something that's wrong with me. I think for decades of that, having that feeling deep down and only knowing that feeling, it's become this really powerful story in my mind of like, you have something to prove. You're not like everybody else. You're not as good as everybody else. And so I think there's this deep down notion of like, I got to prove everybody wrong.
Everest to me felt like conquering the demon.
This is my friend Amy Board and the former executive director of the Colorado chapter of NHF.
When you guys left for Everest, people cared. And it really was very moving to see the energy at home and around the world. I think it was surprising to me because the other climbs did not garner as much attention that this one did. And in the midst of it, like right in the beginning, it was kind of like an aha moment, like, duh, of course this is going to be big. This is Everest. It's just different. Everest is just different. And there's a mythology to it. And so it was very emotional to see people follow this. And the amount of people that were watching, the amount of people that were supporting was unreal. And I think as the person in his circle and in his team that thought the way that I did in terms of advocacy and fundraising, I think my mind immediately went to that of we have to capitalize on this. It felt like it put hemophilia on the actual map.
It's part of why what you've done and continue to do with the organization is educate people that, number one, about the condition, but also that the options are not closed to people.
Yeah.
Having him summit was so joyful. And a week or so later, we all met him at the Denver airport. And there was a little group of us. And he walks out of the escalator thing. And he just very shyly goes over to Jess. He just has like this look on his face. And everyone was freaking out. And I couldn't go near him for a bit. And I was not okay. I actually had to like go away and cry a little bit. He didn't look like himself. He had lost, I don't know how many pounds, but he looked like half of who he was. His skin was hanging on his bones. And I know he had just done like a long international flight and travel, so of course he was tired, but there was something gone in his eyes. He didn't look joyful. He was you could tell he was so relieved to be home, but it was like he came home from war and he had seen which is very true, but he was different when he came home. And there was a spirituality to him. There was a stillness that had not been there before.
Just because someone may look successful externally, either with the summits of mountains or mountains of money, doesn't mean they have it all together internally. We often judge people based on this outward success, but need to remember to have compassion for their internal struggles. It's also crucial we don't fall into this happiness trap. We can all be distracted by the outward successes we constantly see on social media. We think these influencers are happy all the time, but that's not reality. We can struggle. We can have rough days. We can be sad or mad, and all of that's okay. We need to remember to enjoy the moments of happiness when they're present, and you'll be surprised how long they last. Just be open and honest with yourself. Sometimes it doesn't work out,
He got denied that permit and it was so painful.
and sometimes it does.
So to get that permit approved, I was there that day he got that permit approved, was just so validating.
Mount Vinson, Antarctica, the last of the 7 summits, the most remote climb I've ever faced in my life. A large Russian jet touches down on the Union Glacier, some 1,800 miles away from the closest hospital. The jet comes to a stop, and the doors open. Freezing cold Antarctic air flows into the cabin. I was finally on the continent of Antarctica. I was dreaming of this place, and it was everything I imagined. Stepping onto the frozen blue ice runway, and seeing the ice-covered continent nearly brought tears to my eyes. Actually, it was probably the freezing cold wind, but we'll go with the first one. Even though it was almost 3 a.m, the environment was cloudy and bright. The sun never sets during the Antarctic summer. From the runway, we took a short van ride. Yes, a souped-up van to the Union Glacier camp that is operated by Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions. Other than the bone-chilling, wind-whipping cold, the climb was uneventful. For as imposing as it seems, the climb is not nearly as challenging as Denali or Everest. And here I was, on the top of Mount Vinson, the last of the 7 summits. I was proud, but here is where I admit that I was also scared. So much of my life had been dedicated to the 7 summits, and now it was over. What's next? The future seemed as vast and open as the Antarctic terrain.
The final summit from Bloodstream Media is brought to you in part by Genentech. Many people think hemophilia is a disorder that only affects males, but there's another side of hemophilia that often gets ignored, and that's women with hemophilia. To break this stigma, Genentech has created a challenge-accepted episode that shines a light on the obstacles women face living with disorders that predominantly affects men. To watch this episode, please visit www.storiesfromthecommunity.com.
I think Antarctica, this sounds ridiculous, but Antarctica was so easy. We weren't worried about him. And Antarctica was just the most perfect place to finish because it was just beautiful and pristine. So Everest is so trafficky and, Everest is like this beast. And Vinson in particular, those pictures, he's just walking on this glacier and it's just this beautiful thing. And I think it was so emotional for him. It was just this pristine thing. And so he could just spiritually experience it, I think.
I remember being excited to see the footage when you came back too.
This is my friend, Rob Bradford.
Because that was another thing. I mean, you had, I don't want to say mastered the GoPro at that point, but you were familiar enough to not ideally ruin it. But I wasn't even going to be anywhere within 10,000 miles of you. So when I sent you off with that GoPro, I was like, oh man.
Yeah, I was worried too.
Yeah.
To see him actually complete this, and he put everything he had into it.
My wife, Jess.
Approximately 7 years, is that right? And all of them on the first try, he really dove in headfirst and gave it everything he had. And to see all of that effort and time and commitment come to fruition, I was so elated. I don't really know how else to describe it. It's incredible to watch that. And it's funny, he's still the same humble person that he was before. And is like, yeah, I did this thing. And I'm standing there behind him like, you climbed a mountain. Be more excited, right? Scream it. But no, I'm still the one that has to brag for him.
Well, it's crazy because that was the last continent I never stood on. So I've been on all 7 continents, which is just wild. But it literally feels like you're on another planet. And then I got to finish this dream on this crazy place with some of my closest friends, Ryan and Vivica, who I climbed a lot of the other ones with. I got to conclude this dream and on a kind of nice, easier climb, which was actually very satisfying of not being stressed about, I mean, obviously it's a mountain, you have to be respectful, but I was like, I got this. I got the experience. This is going to be fun. And just getting to like really enjoy that moment of finishing the 7 summits, but almost instantaneously after being on the summit and like coming down like the ridge a little bit, it's like, dang, it's done. What do you do now? It was crazy how instantaneously that was, where I almost kind of felt lost again, like when baseball ended back in college, of like, all right, but now like that was my identity again, and like I felt wrapped up in it, and it was over. And that was really, really strange to feel that real high of the finishing the 7 summits, followed by like a kind of a weird low. So that was a really interesting climb for those reasons, because yeah, it felt like, okay, now I got to do something else. Sometimes I wonder, when I was trying to do the 7 summits, if my hope was that when I finished, this feeling of not being good enough would be gone. It didn't happen though. And that was kind of I don't know if it was disappointing, but it was surprising. Maybe subconsciously I thought the mountains would be that thing to prove everybody wrong, but that voice is still there. That story is still alive and kicking. But it's been wonderful to have the vocabulary now to understand and be able to recognize it when those thoughts come up and they're very powerful and overwhelming, and being able to like have a little bit of a rational discussion with myself of like, all right, is this real? Like, is this really like you're not doing a good enough job? Or is it your mind is telling you you're not good enough? Is it this deep-seated story telling you that? And it's been nice to be able to kind of manage those situations better, but it hasn't gone away, unfortunately. I don't know if it ever will, but now at least I know it's there.
I think the thing I've seen that's been really cool in you is the kind of confidence that has grown in you and in your mission and your purpose and your resolve to follow through on that. I felt like before, especially even when we were at base camp, there was almost like you almost felt guilty about it. There was like a level of, it requires so much effort. It requires so much patience. It requires a lot of organizing your life around your mission and purpose, a lot of expenses, a lot of real big life decisions are centered around that. And I think there was like a level of, I'm totally projecting, but I think there was like maybe some guilt surrounding that with you as well. And it's understandable, but at the same time, it's been really cool to see that kind of resolve just settle in you. And you know that, yeah, this is my mission. I'm able to like affect change. I'm able to really do stuff to make a difference. And so that's been really cool to see that kind of like steady confidence settle in. It doesn't feel apologetic anymore. It feels like purposeful and like claiming your space. I think that's pretty awesome.
I would say, right around the climb of Carson's Pyramid, I did kind of start having these thoughts about, all right, outside of these climbs, what do I want my life to look like? How can those values that I have lead me towards something else in this world that's bringing some positive change? I didn't know what that looked like. The climbs were great and they were amazing, and I was able to raise money for Save One Life, and that was a great goal. But I knew there was something else, there was something more. And that's where I think this sense of mission to help people with bleeding disorders in developing countries like really grew and kind of sprouted, I guess. It was like right around that time, I was like, there's got to be more. There's got to be a way to continue this in a different direction that isn't me just climbing mountains. I want to go out and do the actual work on the ground. And I found this global health program at Northwestern, and I was like reading the curriculum, and I was like, oh, that's it. They're going to teach me about access to medicine and global health systems and all these amazing things. And I was like, oh, this is it. And I think I applied for that program like a week after I found it. I was like, yes, this is the way to do it. And it took me from 2016 to 2020 to finish it, so it took me a few years. But it was the first time in school that I was like so interested in the topics, and I was like, this is important information. I'm going to read this textbook front to back because I need to know this information. It's important. It can help me. And then in 2018, I got the opportunity to work at Save One Life, and I was like, yes, I get to use this information I learned and bring it to this organization and do something with it. And it was amazing. It was like that rekindled energy from like the 7 summits, but directed towards this bigger, more ambiguous goal, but like I would say even more important one potentially, because it can hopefully help. Now, with climbing, it was like learning hard skills about like walking with crampons and self-arrest and crevasse rescue and all those things. And now it's like, how do you run a nonprofit, and what's the best way to implement these global health programs. And it's a little more challenging, but it's a beautiful challenge in its own right.
We definitely want to grow our family and have some more little kiddos join us. Chris has since finished his master's degree, so we're thinking about, what are next steps for his career. He just recently got a government job. He can be called into disaster areas around the country, and he's sort of the public health advisor between boots on the ground in the disaster area and the government. So he's sort of that liaison between the two and advising, here's what is needed, here are the resources we can provide. He just received his clearance, just got his badge, so he hasn't done anything yet, but he's technically deployable now. We both have a strong desire to potentially live internationally and have Chris work internationally in that capacity. We talk a lot about traveling with Carter and with family in the future. The Everest base camp trek for Save One Life is coming up in about a year, next spring. And we're definitely bringing Carter with us to Nepal.
Since Carter's been born, I had never even considered, how am I going to tell him about climbing the 7 summits, or how is that ever going to come up? And then one of our friends said it to me. Carter's going to be like so pumped to be able to tell his friends about his dad. And I was like, that's pretty cool. It never crossed my mind. I never thought about how it's going to impact his life, and what this journey is going to mean for him.
I think Chris and I were going to be excited no matter what baby came into our lives, but he is just pure sunshine and joy. Just turned 1, and he's got his own unique spunk, and it's so fun to watch. He is not only walking, but just running. He is anxious to do everything on his own. He's Mr. Independent. He just has this really exciting curiosity about everything around him. He loves to explore. I already see that little adventurer in him, just like his dad. He's so kind and friendly. He's just a love. He's such a love.
For me, I don't think that the final summit has a clear definition, and I think that's okay. For me, I think the final summit is trying to put all these pieces together, things that I've learned, things that I hope for Carter and my relationship with Jess, and how I interact in the world, to put all those pieces together and just feel like I'm making a difference and bringing a positive change to this world, positive voice, potentially inspiring people to step out of their own comfort zone and try and chase their goal. And I think that it's a lifelong journey, always striving towards that goals and those values. It's never done, right? You're never done learning. You're never done trying to be a better human and trying to be a positive light in this sometimes very challenging world. And it definitely doesn't mean I don't have those valleys on the way. But I think that's what the final summit means to me. What do you do when you achieve your dream? How can you turn that dream into a mission? How do you keep going after the goal has been reached? I did what I had to do. Take what I learned and help those in need. My dream led me to the top of the 7 summits, but my mission led me to save one life and to a new family and a bright future. Thanks for listening to The Final Summit, a podcast from Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, supported through advertising by Tremo Pharmaceuticals and Genentech. Be sure to rate and subscribe to The Final Summit on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share this episode with a friend. I'm Chris Bombardier. Until next time, find your outside.
To learn more about Chris's work with Save One Life, visit saveonelife.org. The Final Summit was written by Chris Bombardier and Drew Johnson. Produced and directed by Keith Cornella. Edited by Greg Bernhard. Artwork by Christina Newhart. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch. The Final Summit was made possible by advertising support from Tremo Pharmaceuticals. Visit resethastudy.com to learn more about their work. The Final Summit was also made possible by advertising support from Genentech. Visit Genentech Hemophilia to take a look at how Genentech is supporting the hemophilia community.